This is spoilers for Barbie if you've never seen the film Barbie, directed by Greta Gerwig, and you don't want to know anything about it or the details of it, then you should stop listening now and come back later. If you have seen Barbie or you don't care about spoilers, then listen on because we're going to just talk freely and openly about the movie Barbie. This isn't necessarily a spoiler, but if you had told me that we'd be doing a spoiler chat for Barbie at any point on this podcast, I would have said you were crazy. But I'm so happy that something was made out of a toy. They did this with Lego Movie to a lesser extent, but they made a movie out of a toy, and it wasn't as vapid as Transformers. You know what I mean? Like that, there are ways to do this that are the safe way that will get a lot of kids very engaged in what you're doing, so that you can make 10 of these and guarantee, tons of money on them. And I think maybe they did that, even though they didn't do it the way Transformers did it. Like they actually gave us stuff to chew on. So I'm excited to chew on it with you guys. Does anybody have something top of mind that we definitely need to talk about?
Zach, you said you were confused by the message.
Sure. So yeah, I'd love to talk to you guys about that and kind of, refresh my memory about like kind of what the final message of the film is. So essentially, I'll briefly sketch out kind of like the roads that lead us to the end, right? So Barbie goes to the real world and learns about the patriarchy. And that basically the world is built around men. And she hates it there, obviously. And Ken learns about the patriarchy as well. And a really funny joke that he thinks the patriarchy is mainly just horses. And I think that's really funny.
Men and horses.
Yeah, because I love horses.
Until he learns that horses are just an extension of men.
Yeah, I thought that was really funny. Anyway, so he exports the patriarchy back to Barbie Land. And the men all get really excited about this and they're totally into it. And then the women, I guess in Barbie Land, fall for patriarchy.
They're like brainwashed by patriarchy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So I understand all this. Barbie comes back. Now she's the only one that understands what has happened, right? She's not been brainwashed by patriarchy like the other Barbies have.
Well,
and so
her and the weird Barbie in that little group. There's like a
yes, yeah, and the two real people, the mom and the daughter. Yeah, so they kind of form like a team, right? So then what they do is through kind of like sneaky, underhanded methods, basically win back over Barbie Land for the women, right? So whatever, I guess matriarchy is the state of Barbie Land, and then in the end, you'll have to refresh my memory about what the Barbies ultimately decide to do about male-female dynamics. But in the end, Barbie leaves Barbie Land and she goes back to the real world.
Correct.
And that's like her choice. So the two things that I did not understand. One is, why did Barbie choose to leave Barbie Land and go to the real world? Because she hated the real world. And the real world is controlled by patriarchy. And she just ostensibly like helped reform Barbie Land to find this like truce, between patriarchy and matriarchy. So I just didn't understand her decision to leave. And then the second thing that I didn't understand is their methods of defeating patriarchy in Barbie Land. They seemed pretty like the kind of things that like we don't want women doing, right? Like toying with men's emotions and like leading them on in order to get what they want. Kind of like, that's not like necessarily like an admirable thing, but then it wins in the end. And then do the Barbies decide like we need to like give the Kens like something, or do they just go back to like being a matriarchy again? Those are the two elements that I didn't really understand. I just know what the movie was saying. So can anyone elucidate those for me?
Yeah, so
I have theories.
to the second point, the Kens are given a little bit more agency after the reform. But part of the joke of the movie is like we're not gonna give them everything. I do agree. I think like if the movie had a very strong message, it would be Barbie comes back and says, patriarchy, bad, we can find balance. Right. Whereas in this movie, it was more of, well, we can give the Kens a little bit more power, but maybe not make it completely equal. I have some other thoughts on the whole comparison between the two worlds, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think in those moments, in the patriarchy, matriarchy, conclusion, I think it's just a mirroring of the real world again, where they're just like, in the real world for the dawn of time, women have been put in a position to be subservient to men, to like be, speaking broadly, kind of at their whim on some level, a tool of theirs, you know what I mean? Property, how it depends on where in history you're talking, but those types of things. And it's only until recently that they've given women, or women have taken agency, right? And worked and been seen as 100% equals, at least in theory. And that didn't happen in one day with one decision or one caper or however long that period is in the movie where the Barbies are, deprogramming the other Barbies. It's not like just in real society, women got the right to vote and things changed immediately and everybody was equal. In this society, they've realized an imbalance and the Barbies have capitulated some, but they haven't decided that it's 50-50 yet, because that's not how it works. It's not how it worked in the real world either. And so to me, that's why you got that kind of ending for Barbie Land. As far as Barbie wanting to go to the real world, I think it's a little bit of a Pinocchio situation going on here, where she's experienced real world emotions and she doesn't like being one emotion normal, or like what was the term they had for him? Typical Barbie, or
she was stereotypical Barbie.
Yeah, stereotypical Barbie. Like, who wants to be stereotypical? Nobody. Her life in Barbie Land was to be stereotypical Barbie. And the only way to have human emotions and experience the full range of a full life for her is to go live in the real world. At least that's how I saw it. Anybody disagree with that?
No, I think that was definitely part of it. And like there was a quote about being a mom, and like, would they stop so that they can see how far their daughters have come?
Mm-hmm.
Like this whole idea of death, and like that death means something, and that like death isn't all bad. Like there's something to having that in your perspective of death that makes real life different than Barbie Land. And the knowledge of that, and the knowledge that it's coming, and thinking about that and what you're leaving behind and all of that. So that's part of what I got out of that, like why she wanted to go back. So it was like the feelings, and then it was also kind of like this bigger concept of death.
I also think there's a little bit missing from the female experience, right? Like her version of female experience at the beginning of the movie is like very surface level. You get to wear the pretty dress, and then you fly off the roof into your perfect car, and then you get to go, ignore Ken at the beach, and then you go home and you do it all over again.
Every nice girl's night.
Day.
Yeah.
Right. And in the real world, it's not perfect like that is, but at least it's different. And you're getting to experience what women actually experience, highs and lows type of thing. And so that's how I saw her making the decision to leave. Now, why she wouldn't like take all the other Barbies with her, or you know what I mean? There was like no, like it didn't seem like she tried to share her experience with the other Barbies, really. She just came and helped them deprogram and then dipped, it felt like. But it wasn't a big deal to me.
I wonder too, like what motherhood had to do with some of that, the choice of motherhood, because in Barbie Land, I mean, there was Midge, but besides Midge, like no other Barbie could have kids. And like that is like that, and she sees the relationship between the mother and daughter, and that's some of what gets talked about, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about if you're thinking about this as like a feminist movie, that like in the end, and like the fact that it ends with her going to the gynecologist, like that's just kind of maybe like another aspect of that too, is like you're not able to do that part of life in Barbie Land.
Yeah, as like a toy that's kind of advertised as for women, for girls, I think the bottom line for me with that ending was she just wanted to experience what it was like to be a real woman.
Right.
After all this time of being played with.
It's a Pinocchio story, right?
Yeah. Does that make sense, Zach? Or are we saying things that doesn't make sense to you?
It all makes sense. I'm not sure the movie like built all of that up. It's more like we're bringing extra things into it, kind of a thing. It to me, her decision to go back to the real world seemed unmotivated, unless you like bring in extra kind of stuff to it.
It's definitely not explicitly said like what we're talking about.
Right.
I just read into the movie.
Right.
For that.
Totally. Yeah. I was just surprised. I was like, you should stay. It's better where you are.
I feel like also I would have to like go back and rewatch the scene where she's making the decision with the maker, because I feel like that's like a whole point. And I read somewhere about like the whole like the hand being on it was like an allegory or whatever you want to call it, with like God the creator and like Adam and like this whole. But anyway, so I think there's some. I feel like now that I know that, I'd like to watch that scene to see if there's other information in there that I missed. Because I feel like that's when the decision happened, was when they were in the white space together.
If I could rewatch the last 10 minutes, I'm sure some of these questions would be cleared up. Because a lot was happening in the last 10 minutes. So yeah, but yeah, it was just some things I was wondering about, like what the overall message of the movie was. But as a whole, I thought the movie was pretty much laid out kind of the case for feminism, right? Especially that one like monologue at the end about like what the experience for women is like.
The America Ferrera gives about like sort of the contradictions of being a woman.
Totally. Yeah. And there's not a lot of movies that'll like kind of as explicitly say those kind of things.
Yeah, I would say it was, but it wasn't to the extreme, which I think is what like the attempt to balance it at the end with the Kens, so that it wasn't like matriarchy wins, you know what I mean? But it was like, how can we do this together? And one of the things that I will say is like, I felt a lot of compassion for Ken in the movie, which I thought was interesting, for like the fact that like he's this guy who is in love with this girl who doesn't return those affections, and like what that meant. And like I was sad at the end when they didn't get together, and maybe that's because like Barbie and Ken, they're supposed to get together. Like that's what you play when you're a young girl, is betting Barbie and Ken together. So I thought that was also an interesting part of that as well, was just the fact that in that situation that Ken and Barbie don't end up together.
Yeah. My daughter's 5 and she has a Ken doll and she never plays with it ever.
Because he's Ann Ken, right?
Also there would have been some jokes that probably would have been more fun. I mean, I recognize that they were fun, but I didn't experience the fun because I wasn't as familiar with the properties. So for instance, who was the second male doll?
He was also
Alan.
Yeah, Alan.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware that there was an Alan doll. I think if I like grew up knowing there was an Alan and not caring about him, every time it was reminded to me in the movie, that would have been a more like experiential fun kind of moment rather than just like I recognize that that's funny.
Yeah. So have you looked this up, who Alan was? So Alan was Midge's husband.
Okay.
So because Ken couldn't have a baby with Midge because Ken and Barbie together, and so they created this family so that Midge and Alan could be together. And they supposedly, I guess, had another. I didn't know this. I learned this because I have a best friend who was very into Barbie in the 90s. So yes, so like that's why Alan never fit in with all the Kens, is because they had to create an Alan for Midge so that she could be pregnant and have a family. So that's the explanation for who Alan is. But that's why he never really fits in with anybody, is because he was created for this very particular thing.
And why he never cares about Barbie. Like all the Kens throughout the whole movie are just thirsty for Barbie, basically. And he's like, he could care less.
Well, so he abandoned Midge?
I know, that was a little.
Did they say that?
They didn't really talk about that. My really good friend here, like she is pregnant and she's like, I wish they would have like done a little bit more with Midge.
Right. Midge was kind of
really cute.
a joke character here and there, but
yeah. But yeah, so that was the connection, was that Alan and Midge were together. But, I don't know how many people would know that, because like I didn't know that, and I played with Barbie, but I think it also depends on when you played with Barbie and what was out and what wasn't and all of that.
How did the Zack Snyder joke go over in your crowds?
My crowd loved it.
Really? In mine, there was only like 3 people laughing, myself included. And I don't think anybody else in the theater understood what that joke at all. Do you remember that joke, Amanda? Did you understand it?
No. Can you remind me what it was?
So it's when the Kens are it's when they've just been deprogrammed after the Kens were like mansplaining Godfather to them and playing the guitar at them and like all that other stuff, which I found very funny.
It was.
So the Barbies have just been deprogrammed, and one of them says something like, I just had a dream where I cared about the Zack Snyder cut of
Justice League.
Was it? Of Justice League.
Oh yeah. No, I didn't get the joke.
Right. Because it's like a very internet thing. It's like a very online, very specific community thing. I don't know why that was in there. Plus, it's like the only thing, I mean, it's Barbie, so it's kind of dated, but it's the only thing in there that I can think of that like in 10 years, even less people will know what that's about. I mean, it's practically an old joke now. So I can't imagine 10 years from now, people will have to Wikipedia what that joke even means.
I kind of felt like, though, they tried to put a lot of different jokes in from different eras, knowing that like there would be people from the 80s to the 2010s. And so like I think there were a lot of jokes that not everybody got, and like some of the audience would laugh out loud and the rest of them wouldn't, and then another one more people, you know what I mean? So I feel like some of the songs and some of the things that were like jokes and those types of things, like some people got, some people didn't get. And I think that was kind of like the point, is like there's kind of something in here for everyone, and we're not going to say like this is the group that we're connecting with. We're trying to connect with all of these kinds of groups.
I'll tell you the joke that got the best reaction in my crowd, and then my favorite joke from the movie.
Okay.
So the joke that got the best reaction was when they talked about rewatching that BBC miniseries about Pride and Prejudice over and over.
Yes.
My crowd loved that joke. And it's funny because I have a lot of friends that in middle school would watch that over and over again. So that felt very perfect. My favorite joke, though, was when the girl calls her a fascist and she's like, I don't control the railways or the flow of commerce. I thought that was so funny because it was just completely unexpected for Barbie to say. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the I Am Ken musical number that went into like a full Broadway production dance, like from like old Hollywood. Like the I Am Ken fight was hilarious, and then they do have a dance off, and at that point I was like, "Yep, I'm sold. This is incredibly clever."
My favorite sequence in the movie was when they were doing the Ken taking over the patriarchy. Like when he's like, "Can I play my guitar at you?" And then it cuts to like the nighttime at the beach, and there's like all the different versions of Ken, like all playing the guitar, playing the same song to their specific Barbie. I was like, this is a great satire. Like I loved it. I think that's why I didn't like the dated joke. It reminds me of Kick-Ass. There's like a joke about the last season of Lost in that movie. And every time I watch it, I'm like, why is this in here? Like, no, it's 10 years later. Nobody cares about the last season of Lost anymore.
How often do you watch Kick-Ass?
Like once every 3 or 4 months.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. No.
Okay, I want to say like.
But I've seen it probably 3 or 4 times
Okay.
for the last decade.
James, I think you need to let the Zack Snyder joke go.
No. That's why I gave it a 4.5 and not a 5.
I will tell you my least favorite moment, which almost took me out of the movie briefly, was the whole car chase in the real world. Because just how prominently they featured the car they were driving and the Chevy logo, it was filmed like a car commercial. And I understand corporate product placement, and you have to raise money for these movies. I get that, but just that 30 seconds was like, I'm watching a car commercial right now, and it just did not work for me at all.
I probably wouldn't have liked it as much, except for as an electric car, and I was like, "Good for you,
Yeah,
have an electric
right.
car in a race to show that they can go fast." So I drive an electric car, so maybe there was
Okay.
some bias with that.
I mean, the suspension on that electric car is amazing. So
I knew I was watching a Barbie movie about a toy owned by a corporation, so I kind of gave up on having to look at corporate things.
Right, but I just think that at least the Barbie movie itself is more clever. Like, it's more callbacks to itself. It's not like they didn't. I don't know. Barbie didn't go find a new Barbie to like help her. Like, it was more like, here's our line of products. It's reminding you about itself, and I'm sure that'll help with its sales. But at no point did I feel like the Barbie movie was marketing me a specific product besides Barbie the brand. Whereas
Does anyone think that Hollywood is going to learn the wrong lesson from this movie's wild success?
What lesson do you think they'll learn?
Well, so for instance, here are the movies that are currently being
I've heard about this.
Yeah.
Hot Wheels, American Girl, Viewmaster, Polly Pocket, Magic 8 Ball, Chatty Cathy, and Masters of the Universe, and Rock'em Sock'em Robots are all just had greenlit movies.
I heard Barney was on that list too, and that's the one that really scared me.
Yeah, possibly.
Like a Barbie 2? They're going to do it on
Barney.
Oh, Barney.
Like Barney,
oh, okay.
The green dinosaur.
Okay. Yeah.
Or whatever he was.
Purple dinosaur.
So perhaps Hollywood thinks that, the reason this was so successful is just we took a property from kids' childhood. So let's do that with every property that exists from kids' childhoods. Instead, what I think made the movie successful is really good casting and really good marketing.
And a good story that wasn't like, that had something to it.
No, I totally agree. I don't know if people knew it would have that until they actually saw it, but I agree that this movie wasn't just vapid. It had something to say.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the fact that it is not vapid is why we're seeing it. I think it's still number one this past week. Number 2, it's selling out theaters still. So it's both successful in its initial run, and now the word of mouth of, this is actually a good movie. You should actually go see this, or people who are seeing it again. So clear mark.
I'm like the type of person that would have never have gone and seen it if like James would have said, yeah, it was stupid. Like, I would have never been like, no, this is a movie that's on my list. Like,
I mean, if Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach was not involved, I probably wouldn't have seen it either, unless I had heard it was really good. I mean, that's pretty much the only reason I had any interest in this. Margot Robbie and
Ryan Gosling.
Ryan Gosling doesn't hurt either, but the combination of those 4 people being involved, I think, brought maybe not a majority of people into the tent, but a lot of people that would not have been in the tent for Barbie. It brought us in to the point where we're like, oh, well, let's keep an eye on this, because what could this be, type of thing.
Yeah.
And what we ended up with is exactly what I can imagine those 4 people making. So that makes sense in my brain. But I think your average Joe moviegoer or Josephine moviegoer has no idea what hardcore movie people think those 4 people would make with Barbie type of thing. But I think the trailers too did not misrepresent what this is going to be. Like, very, and most of the marketing I saw, it was very like, we're going to be campy. We're going to go some places. This is not, your G-rated Barbie movie to bring your 4-year-old to. You could, they'd be fine watching it, but there's more here than just that.
Is it just me, or has Ryan Gosling never been bad in a movie?
Never been
bad.
I would have to. You mean like as a bad guy? Or
No, as an
a
actor.
bad actor.
I think he's always given a good performance.
Yeah, I'd say he's
almost all of his movies, I would
consistent.
say, is good. But
I mean, do you think he was good in The Gray Man?
I didn't see The Gray Man.
The movie aside, just his performance.
He's fine in The Gray Man. They're not asking much of him in that.
I'm just looking at his movies, and he's been great in all of the ones I've seen.
He's kind of great. This could be a career-defining role for Ryan Gosling.
Well, he's already had a few of those, like Drive and The Notebook.
No, but like I imagine
La La Land.
in 10 years,
La La
if you
Land.
check his IMDb, Barbie could be one of his top 4.
Well,
Yeah,
by then there'll be Barbie 2 and Barbie 3, I'm sure.
So that's the thing is, I'm sure there are executives and Mattel's like, okay, let's make Barbie 2.
Oh, yeah.
And would Greta Gerwig do it? And what story is there to tell? Like, is it just going to be just Barbie in the real world? Or does Barbie have to go back to Barbie lands? Or is it going to be like a Ken spinoff? I just don't see any reason there has to be more of these.
Well, you're not making money off of it. If you were, you'd see a lot of reasons.
I'm
make
saying
more of
like
these.
artistically and story wise. Like I
Okay.
think this movie is special and unique because it was able to balance this property and give us a real story with some teeth to it.
Right.
And I just don't see any way that can recreate this.
But you're talking about a business that essentially made a doll that was
Yeah.
a hit and then made 8 million variations of it for the next 50 years.
I know, but I understand that there will be a sequel. I'm not naive to that.
Yeah.
I just don't think it can reach the quality that this one reached.
Do you know
Sure.
this movie was originally co-written and starring Amy Schumer
Yeah, I'd
Oh,
heard that.
interesting.
in 2016?
I think it would have been a very different movie.
Right.
Mhm.
It was not only different because it would have been Amy Schumer, but also you wouldn't have had the Greta Gerwig, Noah Baumbach.
Right.
To do it. Do they say who was going to direct it around that time, or
Zack
no.
Snyder.
They don't.
maybe?
John McTiernan.
I kind of feel like this might be. I know people know Ryan Gosling from The Notebook, certainly. Maybe from La La Land. I know La La Land was like a decent sized hit for sure. But those are maybe the only ones when I look at his list of movies. Like Drive is popular, but I don't think it's super popular amongst like your
I don't
average
know. I don't know what that is.
Yeah,
mass
Like,
right.
consumer.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a movie more than a average movie.
What
goer
about Blade
movie.
Runner?
No, Blade Runner 2049 is totally a movie person movie.
I mean, I've seen it.
I
and
think
I'm
a
not
lot of people
super
saw
movie.
that though, at least.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well,
of
if
what-
you're talking
Probably
about
The
like the
Notebook.
quadrants, right?
Mhm.
The Notebook has you covered as
Right.
far as like some of the other ones.
Right.
But like this might introduce Ryan Gosling to a not a generation that saw The Notebook, which is a 15-year-old movie.
Mm-hmm.
20-year-old. Yeah.
2003 that movie
almost
came out?
20-year-old.
2004.
That movie's
Yeah,
20 years
2004.
old.
Almost.
Wow, I thought that was a different. Okay, wow. There you go. You're right. So, it's 20 years old. Has Ryan Gosling aged in 20 years?
I mean, I'm sure he has some.
That's amazing.
I
Good
will
on
say
you.
Ryan Gosling is going to be in Project Hail Mary,
Okay.
Mhm.
and that's directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, and that movie's going to be huge. It's the same author. They wrote The Martian.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Wrote the book Project Hail Mary.
Yeah.
And the book's super good. And yeah, it's Lord and Miller. And yeah, that movie's gonna be very well received too, I'm sure.
Should I read the book?
Definitely.
Actually, I have a question for Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that you played with Barbies growing up.
Yep.
And I feel like there's a common argument in the last 20 years that Barbies are inappropriate because they are unattainable bodies and, teach young girls bad habits about their bodies, whatever. And I've heard multiple interviews recently, like in asking women about their playing with Barbies, and none of them ever said, I feel like I need to look like Barbie. So, did you, as when you were a kid, you ever feel like, oh, I need to look like this? Or was Barbie like, oh, this is a toy I can dress up and make believe with?
I don't remember having those feelings.
Okay.
But I've never really had those feelings. Like,
about anything.
just about, about like needing to look a certain way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't wear a lot of makeup. I am who I am. So I feel, but obviously, I don't think one necessarily means the other, but I also would say I don't think it helps either.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think it's also interesting to know, Barbie was not based on the initial model of Barbie was an adult toy. It was not.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you know the history, but I listened to a podcast about some of that, and it's modeled after a doll that the creator found in Europe that was a doll basically that men would put in the front of their cars as so,
a curvaceous woman.
Yes. And so that's what it was based on. And so it makes sense of what it developed and what and I think they have been trying to have this be this isn't the one and only. But I would say personally, I don't remember having those feelings. I do remember having the Barbie that I remember the most is I had a Belle Barbie, Belle from Beauty and the Beast.
Oh yeah.
So and it's hard to say too, because that's how everything was. Every Disney character looked like that too. So I don't think that's just on Barbie kind of thing. If we do have those kinds of models in our head, they came from many places. But yeah, I do remember being why are the feet stuck like this? Why can't she wear just flip-flops?
Yeah.
Why does she have to wear high heels? That's the thing that I probably remember the most about the shape of Barbie was I don't understand why she has to always wear heels. And I, to this day, never wear heels. So maybe that's why, because it looks so uncomfortable.
Right.
The thing I like most about the Barbies playing with my daughter is all the little accessories. I love tiny miniature things, and there's so many.
Yeah,
Great.
I never had the Barbie dream house, but I had this suitcase thing that fit all of that stuff in it, that had drawers and hangers for all of her clothes.
I think we have that.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
That suitcase. Yeah.
I had a friend whose sister had a dream house with the elevator on this side. I thought it was a pretty cool toy.
Yeah.
We definitely put G.I. Joes in there, put the G.I. Joes in the elevator. This is pretty sweet.
I did like the moment in the movie where they kind of, and I'm sure this is a little bit of Mattel trying to save face and address the issue that we're discussing right now. But where they were kind of don't define yourself by what you think will impress other people type of thing. She kind of flat out says it to Ken towards the end. She's like, your entire reason for being is to impress me, and that's not a good way to live type of thing. It's not a healthy way to live. I don't think she said it in those terms, but that was the gist I got from that conversation, and it just kind of releases him from the pressure of I exist just to impress a woman, essentially. And I think they're speaking to men who feel a pressure in that moment to be perfect because it will get you a woman, because it will get you the other things that men are supposed to accumulate. But I think it was also a message to just about anybody, including women, that it's just you shouldn't look at our toy and think this is what I should look at, or you shouldn't, you know what I mean? You shouldn't base your self-worth on what you other people or what society or what, what you think you should do rather than what you want to do. So I like that message in the movie. I'm not sure it's the strongest of all the messages, but I did like how they brought that around. I thought the movie was like amazingly, what's the word?
Pink?
No, it was amazingly pink for sure. It was nice to men. You know what I mean? It was like, look at all this stuff that, the entire movie is kind of this commentary on how a men-ruled society is kind of ridiculous. Because in the beginning you have the exact opposite, and then in the real world you have some representation of what real life is. And then at the end they're kind of like, they kind of they excuse it on some level. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like, this would have happened were the women in charge from day one.
With
that
Barbie,
doesn't excuse you from continuing to do it. You know what I mean? Even with like having the Barbies not give them a seat on the Supreme Court. You know what I mean? They didn't immediately say like, oh, if this was switched, women would do it perfectly day one. No, that's not how it ended.
So this is when I wish I could just like bring Megan down, because these are her words and not mine. Because she and I had this exact same conversation where I was like, oh yeah, Barbie Land's just like, it's just like a mirror image matriarchy, and she was like, no, Barbie Land is not the same as the real world. And I was like, well, how so? And she goes, okay, in Barbie Land, yes, women are in charge, just like in real worlds, men are in charge. So it's like there's the commonality there. But she goes, but in Barbie Land, men are they're superfluous. Like, what is Ken's job? Beach. Like, he doesn't have a job, right? No, none of the men actually have a job, right? Whereas in the real world, women are treated as superfluous, but still have jobs, like are still expected to do things. And as she says, do even more things, but be given less credit or less agency with it. And then she said the other part that was the difference, and they kind of make a joke in the movie about this too, is kind of the sense of danger and violence, where at no point did Ken in Barbie Land feel like people are looking at me and I fear for my life. Where Margot Robbie, Barbie makes the joke, where she was like, people are looking at me and I sense violence. So I think, like,
she was definitely not a 1-for-1.
Right. She was trying to point out that, like, yes, there's Barbie Land does have some similarities to the real world, but there is still the safety of Ken, and Ken has no expectations except just be there. Whereas in the real world, women have a lot more expectations.
Yeah, I think Megan's definitely right about those. I guess the way I saw it was more, a matriarchy wouldn't look exactly like a patriarchy would. Okay. Like I wouldn't expect a matriarchy to have that same undercurrent of violence that a patriarchy does, because it just seems like men are more violent than women.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect them to be a mirror image, but Barbie Land did feel like a matriarchy, right?
No, just it's a matriarchy. I think the argument was it's not a 1-to-1.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
It's not a black and white, like it's opposite land kind of thing.
Yeah. Can I say one more like little Easter egg thing that I read about that I thought was pretty fun? The 4 girls, the like teenage girls that she introduced herself to because she thought she was that girl's Barbie. Those 4 girls, their names and the way that they were dressed was the same as the original 4 Bratz dolls, which was Barbie's like competitor. And they were kind of bratty to her. So I thought that was funny.
Interesting. Okay, so that was the daughter and her 3 friends?
Yes, their names were the same as the original 4 Bratz dolls.
Oh, interesting.
I kind of feel like I heard some laughing when they were like, they actually say their names, right?
Yeah, her? And they're not typical names. They're like Sage and, stuff like that.
Right. I remember hearing like a couple snickers around that. I had a real Zack Snyder moment where I was like, what? What's so funny? But now you've explained it. 5 stars now.
5-star movie.
I will say one of the things that I also thought was interesting that was thrown in there was when Ken was looking for a job in the real world and told that he had to like do something in order to get it. Like, I don't know. There was just something about that also made that like, where it's not, the point wasn't like men just rule the world and like you step in and you get to do whatever you want. Like there is still some, I don't know. I just thought that was nice that there was some reality in that as well. That like you can't just step in and be a doctor. Like that's not as far as it goes, kind of thing.
But then they kind of undercut it where Ken said to one guy like, "But I thought you guys do patriarchy," and he goes, "Oh, we do. We just hide a lot better now."
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, you guys want to hear, before we get out of here, some reasons why it might be PG-13?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that was a spoiler.
Ken asks Barbie to spend the night.
No.
PG-13.
No, that happens in PG movies.
Right. But then they even say to do what? And they go, I don't know. So like they don't even know why they want to spend the night.
A character wonders aloud what Ken is packing.
Yes, I did hear that as one of them.
The film contains suggestive pickup lines and double entendres.
Yeah, like no PG movie has double entendres.
After the Kens take over, several Barbies are shown flirting with and serving the Kens, often scantily clad. I don't really remember them being scantily
I don't remember
clad.
what they were wearing. Were they scantily clad?
They're wearing like maid. Go ahead.
Maid outfits. Yeah, that type of thing. Like nothing that's worse than what a Barbie looks like when you're like, I mean, like the outfits that a Barbie would wear. Like, again, like I think of Galaxy Quest and I'm like, yeah, no question. Like those outfits were way worse.
Yeah. Sigourney Weaver is falling out of her uniform. That's like the joke of the movie is she's more and more naked or less dressed as the movie goes on.
So nothing compared to that, I would say.
Yeah. Speaking of naked, the primary Ken is frequently shirtless.
That's
Was anyone else bothered by like the look of his like chest?
Do you?
I wasn't, because I got it. Like Ken dolls are like very defined.
It was just so oddly plasticky, make-upped.
Right,
like
so
his chest was very odd.
Did they put makeup to highlight his abs?
I think they did.
Okay,
yeah,
they must
like,
have.
Yeah, like contour.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he earned those abs. Like, I'm not saying that those are CG or anything. This is no 300 here, but
yeah, it was just so odd. It was off-putting a little bit.
Yeah, I thought. See, for me, like it like brought it more to be Ken. Like it has to be almost ridiculous.
Yeah,
yeah. I have a list of all the bad words in the movie. You guys want to hear that?
Ooh, I want Zach to read it. Just no.
I'll code this. If you have little kids listening, maybe skip forward 15 seconds. Okay. One bleeped MF. Mm-hmm. We all remember when that happened. I loved how when they bleeped it, they put the Mattel logo over her mouth. That made me laugh.
Do you think they try to sneak in the actual word and Mattel's like, no? So then they.
I don't think so.
Because you can get an
that was
MF on a PG-13.
Like, they could have actually said it on a PG-13 movie, and they didn't. That's why I feel like it's totally undeserved.
Yeah.
I liked the joke where, you know, she's crying about how she's not beautiful anymore, and Helen Mirren chimes in and is like, well, if the producers wanted to sell this point, they wouldn't have cast Margot Robbie. I thought that was funny.
Sure. Now that I could see them writing after the fact.
Oh, adding that little voiceover part in? Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
if you fast forwarded, do it again, because I'm gonna run down this list. The D word, HE double hockey sticks, crap.
The D word.
Yeah, DAMN.
Oh, like the Holland.
Right.
Okay.
Bimbo, tramp, stupid, penis, vagina, crazy, nut job, G's, oh my god, freaking, frigging, shut up, and up the wazoo.
Like
up the wazoo.
You know, what is it? Like the Sandlot is PG.
Yeah,
and there is some much harsher language in that movie, and that's a Disney movie.
James, thanks for that, because I've been training an AI model on your voice, and there was a few gaps from our hours of the Cinereelists, so you really filled it in there. Thank you.
Some wazoo in there.
Nice.
Some hockey.
On this guide, though, they did give the movie 4 stars for positive messages and 4 stars for positive role models.
Impressive.
Which is good.
Are you on Common Sense Media?
Yes.
Okay.
And for drinking, drugs, and smoking, the Kens have a lot of brewskis.
Brewski beers.
Yeah. Somebody mentions being day drunk at one point. I don't remember that. But it's a big part of the movie. I'm sure the kids.
I do feel like
needed
seeing this movie again, I would get more of the things.
Right.
Like there's so much jam packed into there, and so many jokes and so many whatevers that I think watching it again, I think I would have a lot of fun watching it a second time, which I don't feel like that for most movies. I am not a rewatcher for most movies. So
I could see watching it again too. And again, this is a best case scenario. Like anything anybody has a problem with this movie, as far as I'm concerned, is like, you don't understand what this could have been. Like, watch a Diary of the Wimpy Kid movie. You know what I mean?
Why are you dragging Diary of the Wimpy Kid?
I'm just saying it's fine,
Yeah, it's
but
fine.
that's a movie about a toy targeted at the kids who play with that toy at that age.
Right.
A book, rather,
What
in
toy?
this case.
Yeah.
And so this Barbie movie is clearly has those people in mind to some extent.
Yeah,
but
it's
for the most
adults.
part, they understand that the much bigger pool is adults.
Right.
And so,
it would be really interesting to like hear what a 10-year-old has to say after they see this movie. I would be really interested in knowing that perspective of like what they got, what they didn't get, if it wasn't funny, if it was entertaining, or if they were like, it was all over their heads and they, couldn't care less if they saw it or not.
There were a couple, I don't know their age. I would assume like either late elementary or early middle school girls in my theater. And the ones that were kind of in my sight line were getting a little antsy during the speechier parts. So like when American Ferrera was doing her speech, or when Ruth Handler, I can't think of her name, the creator, is kind of giving that final speech to Barbie at the end. They were definitely getting squirrely. Again, these were two kids. I don't think that speaks for every 10-year-old girl in the country who saw it, but that's just anecdotally what I noticed.
Nice. Anything else anybody needs to say about Barbie? Great. Anybody changing their star rating? Nope. All right. Amanda's sticking with her 4.2. Thanks for being on the podcast, Amanda. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. You guys have fun.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.